I never went looking for adventures, let alone hunted for spooky stories. But one event that happened to me a few years ago made me see such places differently. It happened in a village where I came to stay for a few days with a friend. At the edge of the street stood an old house. It looked as if no one had lived there for years. Broken windows, a roof caved in several places, and weeds waist high all around. Locals said that a lonely woman used to live there, and after her death, no one ever bought the house. One evening, while we were sitting in the yard with friends, one of them mentioned that as a kid, he used to go inside with other boys. He said there was nothing particularly scary, but he always had the feeling that someone was watching. After a few jokes and "you're just scared," he and I decided to check it out. It was already dark. We took a flashlight and went to that house. The door, as expected, had been torn off its hinges. Inside there was the smell of mold, old wood, and something else, hard to describe, but it instantly gave me an uneasy feeling. We passed through the first room. There were old pieces of furniture, everything covered in dust. In the corner stood a wardrobe, with the doors half open. I was about to step closer when I heard a faint sound coming from the second room, like someone slowly running their fingers along the wooden wall. My friend laughed, saying, "It's just a mouse," and went ahead. I followed him. The second room was even darker because the windows there had been covered from the inside with old rugs, and that's when, for the first time, a chill ran straight through my bones. Not from the cold air, but from the sudden realization that someone else was in the room with us. We stood in silence, and at that moment the flashlight began to flicker. I turned it to the left, and for a split second in the beam, I saw something that made me clench my teeth. By the stove, slightly hunched over, stood a figure. I couldn't make out the face, but I clearly saw a pale hand slowly touching the wall, and in the next second, the flashlight went out. Darkness was absolute. I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face. The thought crossed my mind that the flashlight might have just died, but I had charged it earlier that same day. "Did you see that?" I asked quietly, but my friend didn't reply. At that moment, the silence in the room changed. I heard very slow footsteps, not firm, not heavy, like someone walking barefoot, barely touching the floor, and they weren't coming from the place where we had just seen the figure, but right beside us. Instinctively, I stepped back, and my foot bumped into something soft on the floor. I bent down and touched it. It was an old child's shoe, just one. "Let's get out of here," I whispered, but again, no response from my friend. I quickly turned to grab his hand and realized that there was no one standing next to me in the darkness. My heart started pounding so loudly it felt like it could be heard. I took a step toward the door, but suddenly I felt a light touch on my shoulder. Not sharp, not aggressive, more like someone wanting me to stop. And at that exact moment, the flashlight came back on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing an empty room. No figure, no footprints, but right on the wall near the stove, where I had seen that shape, there was a clear handprint, lighter than the rest of the dirty surface, as if it had just been touched. I turned around, and my friend was standing in the doorway. He was holding another flashlight and looked pale. "Where did you disappear to?" he asked. "I was about to ask you the same thing," I replied. I I just came in here. You weren't inside." We left the house, and only once we were outside did I realize how badly my hands were shaking. The air felt colder than it had just a few minutes earlier, and only two questions kept running through my mind. What was that? And why did my friend disappear, even though he swore he had been outside the whole time? The next day, I decided to talk to an elderly woman who lived next door. At first, she didn't want to say anything, but when I mentioned that house, her expression changed. "You'd better stay away from there," she said quietly. "A widow used to live there with her daughter. The little girl was frail, often sick. They say she vanished under strange circumstances. One day her mother went out to the fields, and when she came back, the child was gone." Neither the doors nor the windows had been broken, and everything in the house was untouched, except for her little shoes. No one has lived there since. I didn't tell her that I had found a single child's shoe in the darkness, or that I'd seen a hand touching the wall near the stove. But that evening, when my friend and I were looking through the photos he had taken on his phone, I noticed one detail. In a picture taken outside the house in the window of the second room, there was a clearly visible silhouette. Small, thin, and standing exactly where I had seen the figure. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it was just a coincidence of shadows. Maybe the old story the neighbor told had subconsciously influenced me. But when I think about that handprint on the wall and the touch on my shoulder, I can't shake the feeling that someone stayed in that house, and that someone has no intention of being forgotten.